Alrighty. Yep, here we go. Alrighty, guys, welcome. This is only the second live stream I've done, and this is a rather interesting topic as a whole because I'm doing it about a novel that I've kind of been thinking about or been in the process of making. And long story short, this novel originally started as a school paper I had to do for an English class, and you had to make a scary story out of certain qualifications, like it had to be 10 pages with this font, all this other English type of things that the paper had to be. And I was always interested in medieval type of material from watching Game of Thrones and from the little I've read from the book, the first book that George R. R. Martin made of Game of Thrones. But the medieval wars in Rome and all those, the Greek Empire, even though that's kind of separate times, all that kind of interested me. So I decided to kind of write it being set in the past and during those times. And so I got I got it all finished and got the 10 pages and got a pretty good grade with it. But after I turned it in, I was always like, I think I could make this into something a little bit bigger than what it was in the past from just the school project. And those of you who followed Game of Thrones or have read George R. R. Martin's books, he's been recently talking on his blogs and other things that he's wanting to publish his Winds of Winter book pretty soon, or at least before a certain date and time period, even though he is very vague about the time period he is going to do it in. But that's for another debate and another topic. So due to COVID-19, there's a lot of downtime that a lot of people are experiencing, so they're binge watching shows and other things like that. But I've taken a more different approach for what I'm planning to do, and that is more thinking about this idea I've had and actually putting it to paper or pen to paper, or in this case typing as a whole. So I'm not exactly sure how it's going to turn out, but we'll see that pretty soon. So I guess I'll kind of talk about what was in my story first and go from there. So I've kind of edited it some from its original content or its original story, but it's still kind of its same sort of viewpoint. So it's, as I've stated, actually I don't think I said this yet. It's stated just after the fall of the Roman Empire, and that was in around 375 AD to 476 AD. But the real date, the actual fall of the Roman Empire, was 375 AD, and they given the date of September 4th if you just search it on Google. So that's kind of the time period I set it in particular for the story. And real quick, the story I wrote it as a first-person perspective of a soldier who was in the battle just after the Roman Empire collapsed. But the story viewpoint kind of changed between several characters and viewpoints throughout the 10 pages. So as I've kind of read through the story and kind of talk about it as we continue through here, it'll be interesting to see how I plan to kind of redo the story, because as I get into the content, I think you're going to start to see a part in the story around the middle what doesn't exactly make too much sense, what I've been trying to fix, but I don't know if I have an accurate fix as of yet. So we'll see how that goes. And also I'm not a tech wizard as other people are, so I might have to go back to the black screen to reply to your comments, in other words, but I do appreciate your comments as a whole, as it makes it a little more involved throughout the video. But anyway, so I figured I would just start with kind of reading the story itself, and then we'll kind of go from there, because I have a couple of ideas, and I'm just going to kind of brainstorm out loud, and I have a couple of programs that I've been using to help the system and to help my ideas kind of naturally come across. So, and I called it The Trials of Rome. So it reads, the rain bleaches the hope from the sky, drowning the wars and sorrows. Sir Felix stares towards the horizon, his coat sodden and sticking to his armor. I would have to grind the rust off later. It irritates me, but it is far beyond me to tell where to stand. So I'll just stop here real shortly. I'm not completely certain that in the medieval times the armor they used would rust. I was kind of just assuming that it would. And obviously it's not going to be fully factual, the novel I'm making, as it's not set in the times. In particular, it's more of a fantasy concept because I'm getting my inspiration from Game of Thrones. But I kind of want it to be a little more realistic than what a lot of fantasy novels are. So I do want to go back and check that if the medieval armor were to rust. And if it not, I might have to change it. But it's more just kind of getting the tone of the story. So I've kind of kept it so far. But it is something I need to research for later on. Water dripped in a long, steady stream from his ankles, and I'm reminded of a metal teapot. Hesitantly I approach, silently loathing that I am forced to leave the shelter of the wooden niche I chose to rest in. Heights I despair, and the rain is frigid and uninviting, but this man commands my soul, and I deny him nothing. I wish that this is not so. I wish that we were safety back within the castle walls, but where he goes I will follow, however miserably. The war lasted many fortnights between the great Roman Empire and the so-called victors, the Franks. And the Franks were the French, for those that don't follow the time period or just forgotten from your high school or whenever you were to learn. For I am with the great Holy Roman Empire under the liege lord Sir Felix. And also, just to interrupt again, the liege lord would be a commander of a certain component of the army. So basically, you would have different parts of the army as the armies were very big. And the liege lord would be that person who controls part A of the army, so to speak. Unfortunately, Sir Felix and many other members of my liege died, leaving me alone to my own wishes and with a promise I have to fulfill. When I first became a knight, that is what sent me to my quest of war of all wars, and the enemy of all armies, or the army of all armies. My first mission started a quest along with other knights, looking into the city we once lost. Now under our control again, I look for any spears, swords, water, knives, notes, maps, and anything that can be used again. It is a dark starlit night as I repeat the words of Lord Dominica. For I am a knight of Rome and shall not be afraid. Right then I feel something hit my foot. Looking down I see a dead, partly petrified body of Sir Felix of Rome, laying in a pile of other corpses. For then I can no longer feel the arming sword, for it falls out my hand and hits the mud where he lays. I did a knightly gesture, as all Roman soldiers do, and take a knee near his head. I think I hear the soft whispers upon his lips. What could not be true? But I swear to the Holy Roman Empire he speaks, for we have lost and we must warn the others. I lay my right hand over his bony, rusted breastplate. Sir Felix, you have done good for Rome. Be not afraid. I will send the message. With a disgruntled grunt, I feel his hand reach over me as he speaks. Page Vitus, you must not stay any longer. Mount and ride to France, where you will be safe. So this part here, there's a couple things. A page is basically under a knight or under a squire. It's essentially your first rank you would get as someone in the medieval times. But it's still kind of a respected soldier because you have been in the soldier army long enough to be recognized to be under someone who is a knight. So it is a rather good command to get. But also the second part to do with the story, as I've said earlier, that the Franks, which were the France, were the victors. So riding back to France doesn't particularly make sense, but I'm not sure I'm going to necessarily change that until I write a little bit more and kind of build my empire and build my thoughts up more. As this is all pretty fluid. Anyway, I thought to myself, how could this be? He is dead, long dead. In fact, the only thing that lies is a pile of bones and skeleton structure. I then take his sword and lay it across his breastplate to honor his service. For those words can't come out of my mouth. For the dead have fallen and have served the Holy Roman Empire. May the gods place his heart upon the gurney of the gods' army. May Rome grow stronger. For each death there is two more who live. The Roman Empire will never fall, for we are the gods' army. Sir Felix alone that day, as the enemy attacked again, starting this long war, one of many dark times with the death of the noble Sir Felix and Avacus Henry. So an avacus is essentially a thief or a criminal that the army makes serve under in order to relieve relieve his, how do I say it, his sentence. So an avacus is essentially someone who served his sentence through the army and decided to come back to the army after he got released from it. So it's a rather kind of a interesting part of medieval times, and I thought I would kind of use that as an example. Even though, as you can tell, he's already dead in the story before you even meet him, I still kind of wanted to involve more than just the average army soldier within my story. And this is the part what somewhat doesn't make sense, so I'm going to go ahead and read it and kind of think about it to myself and if I need to change it already, as it is pretty close to the beginning of the story. But I kind of switch time periods, so I go to the death of Sir Felix and then Avacus Henry, but then I go back in time to kind of show that process and what happened. So I kind of skip between 3 different time periods, as you can see, within a very short amount of time. And again, I'm not sure if I need to change that as of yet, but I'll read it and kind of think about it a little bit more. And John says that it would rust since it was steel. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I know I wrote that with a knowledge of basically metals, and I would think that they would rust, but then again, I wasn't completely certain. So yeah, I mean, I know that that's your that's your expertise. So yeah, I might have to rely on you a little bit throughout this novel experience. Anyway, I'll read again. Liege Atticus had ordered the construction of the forward base and had sent scouting parties to observe the surrounding areas. 3 of Rome's own legions had pushed their way into the enemy territory. The camp would have been used to aid and protect the forward expansion parties and to house Roman soldiers and camp followers should General Pius decide to advance. And I put in parentheses here Caesar because I'm kind of basing General Pius off of Caesar as kind of my historical perspective and historical person, because I kind of wanted him to be a very big commanding person throughout the story. And I decided to call him General Pius for now, as Pius kind of has some other meanings, and I kind of plan on using that throughout the story. Anyway, what's that? Said Henry, an avacus from the 3rd Legion, attacked to me for his skills in hunting and retrieving lost or getaway slaves. Who knew these skills would make for a great scout? My thoughts are interrupted by the sight of an avacus running towards the tree line, the field beyond covered in smoke. Sir, yells Henry. I hear my own heartbeats as I approach Henry. What is it? He says excitedly. I receive my answer in a form of a petrified face with a gaping mouth looking into the direction of the camp. It's on fire, Henry, I say as my breath speeds up, my palms sweat. I had to help my comrades. Go! I tap Henry and make our way towards the camp, edging the tree line. Shoo, shoo. The wind the arrow brought with it caressed my left cheek. The second arrow hits Henry in the chest and lodges itself halfway deep. Henry! I have a choice. One of honor or one of survival, as the arrows fly past me in every direction. My survival instincts kick into action as I dodge and duck in every direction. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Arrows keep flying. I get onto my knees, holding Sir Henry in my arms. And right here, I just realized I need to change that, because he's not a sir, because that's a title that would be given to someone who's kind of a higher command, obviously. And an avacus and former criminal wouldn't have that as their he doesn't deserve that ranking. Anyway, going on. Now a greater choice must be made, just as I get onto my knees, putting my ear over Sir Henry's face. Again, sir. And I think this was the part of where I started to change it, because as I was reading through my story from when it was written as a scary story for my English class, I noticed that there was an inconsistency. So I think I decided to change Sir Henry, because I also didn't want too many high-ranking soldiers to die so early on, because that's kind of bizarre. That wouldn't necessarily happen that way. You kind of want to provide many perspectives and many different ideas of people who were to die. It's not just high lords would die in wars. But anyway, so I think that's kind of the part I started to change, but I haven't fixed everything yet. But anyway, I'll read from that line again. Just as I get onto my knees, putting my ear over Sir Henry's face, I hear nothing but glad sounds. As blood spits out across Sir Henry's mouth and over his chin, the choice is made for me. Henry is dead in a cold-blooded attack. I must tell my liege. As his thought comes across my mind, the arrow pierces my skin, driving through my soldier plates and into the bone. I bite my lip to keep quiet, showing that I am a man, but the pain is massive. I recline against a tree, push the cleaning rag into my shoulder, and pull the arrow out, and throw it into the bushes. I lay holding my shoulder with the rag, laying still. Only the dirt itself can know I am there, but nothing else. I'll wake. So right here, I wanted to kind of injure the character to get him to my next scenario. And as I read my next scenario, you'll kind of know why. But I didn't want to necessarily say, and he faints. So I wanted to leave it with a rather ominous ending before I get into the next part of the story, where it's kind of like the second scene of the short story when I'm making into a novel. So I'll kind of read that next part, but before I do that, I'll check the comments here. Thank you, John. Yeah, I try. That's also what's taken me a long time to write this story and to write this novel and to kind of brainstorm, because I'm a decently creative person, but writing isn't necessarily my strongest suit, nor is reading my strong suit. So I'm trying to read more and write more just to kind of to get a better grasp of it, because obviously the more practice you do, the better you get. So that's kind of the approach I'm taking. So this story took a long time to write, but it's also, I think, a very good story, so I kind of am very happy with it. So I'll read again. I awake to a rather pleasant room, though I will admit my bias for what is pleasant at that point is quite tainted. Anywhere that isn't a muddy, blood-filled hole is a paradise. The floor is strewn with clean pressed reds, a butte to walls which seem to blur together in a hue of gentle brown. 2 candles dance upon a clean table. The purple smear alongside them may have been flowers, I am unsure, and sleep soon retakes me. As I come once again into consciousness, I am aware of another presence. To then I am wary but unthreatened. I could have been left to die in that muddy ditch with my master, and yet here I am, clean and safe. My soldier throbs, but it's a gentle hurt, a hurt that leads itself to healing rather than affection. Irrationally, I wonder if Henry has also been saved. As my brain starts to theorize the rare possibility, in walks a woman with pretty hair down to her shoulders. Her hair catches my eye as it ripples in the purest color of black I have ever laid eyes upon. I felt so soulless, and yet so lovely at the same time. The darkness of color teases at my mind as I find myself drawn in. My mind seems to freeze, and time slows. With tantalizing feelings running through my veins as she giggles, I realize how rude I am in being, and blush furiously. The look she gives me is professional, but also seems girlishly flattering. Soldier, how does your shoulder feel? Her calm question pierces my scattered thoughts. Oh, it's nothing, just a little scratch, I stammer. Her gaze growls reproachful, but she does not respond. To escape her, I quickly glance around the room, slowing down and taking more notice of my surroundings as I realize how foreign they look to me. I notice the banner hanging over the doorway, but don't recognize it. The colors aren't like home, no reds or blacks. Instead, they boast proud blues, yellows, and grays. The banner has a solid toned color of gray with the house sigil of a yellow boat, the blue wave-like motions appearing under the boat right in the corner of the sigil. I have to know where I am. A twisting memory is tantalizing at the edges of my awareness, but I just can't bring the name to mind. Is it a friend or foe? Have I been taken by an ally or captured? Am I even worth anything to ransom? I start to sit up, but she puts her right hand over my tunic and shoves me firmly but not roughly onto the bed again. I open my mouth to protest, but she interrupts. Rest, soldier, the war is long and will wait for you. As she stares, as her steady hands lift a pillow, I flinch away from her and feel a bit foolish as she ignores me and places it under my bed. Filled with my impatience and worry, I cry out to her, I can't rest, I need to know where I am. Shaking her head, she said firmly, if you move, the treatment will never work. The maggots will fall out and the blood will kill the stream of the herbs. Rest is what you need. She pushes me back onto the bed and I find myself unable to resist, weak as a newborn kitten. Frustration swims within me, but my body feels heavy and unable to respond properly. My mind is similarly boggled. Maggots. Visions of maggots crammed through my body, pulling in... I lost my place. There we go. Slowly ripping me into pieces from inside, cheering through my head, and my stomach churns with them. The thunder in my ears be my heart, for surely nothing else can possibly be so loud. As I lie there, the ceiling blurs as dizziness overwhelms me, and I feel a sway of nausea raise in my gut. Despite to have something to distract me, I open my mouth, the words sticking in my throat. Coughing slightly to clear it, I try again. Where are we? I ask in a voice I hope doesn't sound as weak as I feel. There is no response of words but in her actions. As I look over my right shoulder, she is standing where I can't see what she is doing. My pride hurt, thinking she can't hear me. I take a deep, sharp breath, reaching into my core. Then all at once speak. Where are we? Answer me. Despite how I want to sound, it comes out in a soft whimper. As she turns around, placing her hand over my forehead, she says, Rest, my soldier. That is how you will heal. She turns back around as I hear a soft clinking sound of a spoon over the hard iron bowl. My eyes become heavy, and I can't look around any longer. It starts moments after I close my eyes. Visions swim before me, blurred and tantalizing, but always just out of my reach. I run towards them, calling out to people whose names I don't remember. Upon walking there, just beyond my line of vision, finally I collapse, sobbing and confused, and the visions spin around me. Whispering to me over and over, they whisper until the words echo inside me. Screaming to be let out. As I lurch back into wakefulness, I become aware of the fact that I am bowed onto the bed, the last syllables of my latest scream still brushing my lips. Come, soldier, what allies thee? The lady looked confused and terrified beside me. A bowl of what must have been water shattered onto the floor and clings to a damp washcloth as if it could protect her from me. Come, I shudder, confused. Though was screaming such at me, she confirms, her eyes still wide with fear. I feel even more dizzy, and visions start to fade as eyelids close themselves, saying nothing. So, before I get into this next part of the story, I'll check to see if there's anything else. Again, that's Don's comment, and thank you for that. And yes, Jimmy, I am going to Stephen F. Austin. I've already been accepted to the college, and I'm going to be going in the fall semester. But I'll get on a slight tangent on that before I go back to the story. They're doing a orientation, but because all of the things going around, as we all know, it's online, and that's going to be rather interesting to have an orientation online, because the whole purpose of the orientation is to actually go to the college to kind of explore the college and kind of learn where things are, so to speak. But anyway, I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's just a rather interesting component of there. But as I was saying, before I get into this third point of the story, this is where it kind of takes the more dramatic part of what's happening. So, because I kind of made the short story into 3 separate acts. You have obviously the beginning, then you have the middle, what happens to the character, and then the third part is also what happens to the character. But if you think about it, you have your little curve, or your triangle, you can think of it. I like to think of it as a triangle, because then you have your climax, and then you have to kind of go back down to have a solid conclusion. So this is kind of where the climax happens, and then the incline happens. Because as you kind of see, I kind of ran out of space, so I had to end the story within a reasonable amount of time. But anyway, before I just keep blabbering on, I'll read. Catherine, open the door. Sir Jester is waiting. Pounds someone at the door. The woman's heart races as she lays her hand over my head, deciding what to do. Do I protect him, or do I show who I found? Before many thoughts could come, the knocking at the door turns into pounding. As the soldiers implement their sword holders, Catherine quickly rolls me onto the side of the bed and onto the floor with a loud thunk. Then she raises from her knees and lifts her dress as she walks to the door, unlocking the latch with a loud squeak. As the latch frees and the door opens, 5 soldiers led by the head of the Queen's Guard, Sir William Kane, enter abruptly. Sir William Kane says, Catherine, come with me, gesturing his hands towards her. Reluctantly, she holds my hand, indicating her hesitation. After what seems a long while, she stutters. What are the soldiers for, my lord? Sir William Kane states, Ah, poor Catherine. They will search your chambers. I know everything and anyone who enters this castle. Catherine follows his glance to the fallen bow, bond ropes, and blood. Before she says anything else, he pushes her forward in front of him. As he casts a glance behind him, he says, My soldiers, search her chambers and report to me what is found. Now, my Catherine, come with me. By holding her arm forcefully and shoving her forward out of the room, the soldiers, all wearing unfamiliar colors, begin to comb the room carefully in search of Page Fetus. The leader, tall, strong, and blue-eyed, commands the room with just his voice. Page Fetus rolls himself under the bed without a noise. He feels like the prey of a hawk during an intense hunting as the soldiers peer in every corner of his quarters. A soldier yells, Look what I found! Distracted, they all rush to the new discovery. A large golden plate, with weight as heavy as their swords, stood before them. The excitement was too much for the soldiers, and they all agreed to tell no one and split the money. The room silences, no footsteps, no talking, not even a sound of his breath sounds. Not even the sound of his breath sounds. Does that make sense? I guess it does. Anyway, he still dares not to move. He lies statue like under the bed as if his life depends on it. A few moments later, a pair of footsteps ring in the distance. The sound runs through the echoing hallways. He still dares to move not. Just a brief glance to his wound with the occasional maggots falling out. The sight, even as a soldier made him bite his lower lip to keep from gagging at the horrific sight. The footsteps echo even louder in the hall, while as each step, seeming like 10, crashes down simultaneously. As quickly as the footsteps start, they end in the front of the cracked door. A black dress seems to stand just on the outside of the room, casting an even darker shadow into the room. A moment pause later, the door swings open just enough to fit a single person of small size. A dark figure enters the room with a loud crack as the door slams and locks shut. He lies still, staying quiet, unsure who the figure is and what the figure wants. He dares not ask either. All efforts and focus on remaining quiet without any movement. The figure approaches. The black of the dress casts long shadows, filling the room with darkness. He tries to make out a face as he peeks from under the bed, but the room looms dark. He senses by the light footfall a female presence which walks closer, stepping one step at a time. Each one louder than the last. In the silence, a cricket sounds like a lion's roar. As she grows nearer, the dress throws a shadow of darkness over the bed. Now beside the bed, her footsteps adjacent to the bed's legs, brushing causes crackling in the ancient furniture. Each movement elevates his heart rate, yet the bravery of a knight peers over the edge. Once he changes a glance at the shadow, a familiar face, yet drawn one, appears. A continuance revealing eyes, wide with fright, pull-ups dilated, causes his muscle to relax as he recognizes his former caretaker. Her voice speaks. Come out from under. I must heal your wound. His mind questions, weighing all options. The locked door, the lack of windows. Escape is futile. With groans he crawls from his hiding place. Extending to his full height, the sight of blood dripping from her right eye registers fully in his mind. Black pools under her face and neck tell the story of an ominous events occurring away from his room. She speaks, Don't worry about me. I will be fine. He says, Have you been hit? What did they do to you? In a commanding voice, Lie, soldier. I must continue treatment. Confused yet trusting her, he lies over the bed. She lights the nearest candle, providing dim but useful light. She picks up the end of the dress sitting next to him. She taps her finger along his chest. She works her hand up to his wound, grabs a pair of forceps, and removes the maggots one by one. Before any other words, a sharp burning sensation falls upon his chest. The burning sensation continues, eating into his skin, causing it to melt around him. He manages to glance down, seeing a gaping hole over his chest. With his vision blurred, something burns into his eyes, melting the skin around him. His eyes melted shut, fold over as he sinks into a black abyss. The lady then says, They beat me, and now I must fulfill the promise I made with them. His mouth could still move somehow. He braves an extreme pain as he manages with gasps to say, Phew, 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 phew. I'm not even sure how to say that. I wrote it, but this was a long time ago, but I think it was more just a phrase. Anyway. Why did you do this to me? I trusted you. Where am I? What is happening? Allowing him to speak with this evil grin, she plunges the dagger into the chest, penetrating the lung while the heart still beats. She moves the blade down to the left, to the right, sideways into his chest. Without speaking, the blood spilling out of his body, she leaves the room. Ominous footsteps fade down the hall. So that is obviously how I decided to end my short story. So as I'm sitting here debating what to do next, I decided that I can't really kill off Paige Vetus this early into the story because it kind of creates a conundrum, as right now Paige Vetus is kind of the main character of the story. And obviously I couldn't introduce someone else or have Catherine as the main character of the story, but I really want Paige Vetus as the character of the story. So I've been trying to think about some ideas I could have to keep the tone of the story, but rather avoid the situation of having him die, as that was the limit I had to do within my scary story. So real quick, I'm take a drink of water and I'll check on your comments and kind of talk about where I plan on going from here. Alrighty. Sweet. Looks like there's no more here, which is good. Okay. So I figured the next place we could go was a app I installed on my computer to kind of help with my writing, because I realized quickly on that I'm not necessarily very good at being able to think about something that's involved with so many character arcs going everywhere, and to be able for it to make sense. I needed something that was going to be able to organize my thoughts, to be able to continue this story forward so that it actually kind of involves more than a couple different things going on at once. And I think that is rather important. So I have installed an app called Campfire. And Campfire is a really good program that I've watched a lot of videos on. And they have a really involved Discord server as well. As I'm on Discord now, obviously have my own channel. And by the way, you should join my channel if you haven't already. And the link will be in the description after this video. Anyway, if you're rewatching it. Or if you're watching it now, you could check after I finish with the live stream to join it. But anyway, I'm getting on a side tangent here. I've decided to use this program to really help with my thoughts. So I haven't put a whole bunch of stuff on Campfire yet, as I've gotten into thinking about this a little more. Excuse me. But I've decided to add all their backstories into this program and to kind of write a short story of it so far on what exactly has happened. So I'm going to start with the unnamed empire. And I obviously have certain information with each person to keep it in charge. So like as you see, his event was the Soldier's Barge In. And I wrote a little bit about who he is. So he's in charge of the Queen's Guard, and he comes into Catherine's room demanding to enter it, as you just heard in the story. And then I have like Sir Jester. As little is known over Sir Jester, but he is above Sir William Kane. Sir will be in charge of the defense of the nation. And then Catherine, little is known about her backstory or where she is from, but she plays a major role in taking care of Paige Vetus. She was very nice at first, but later turns into a show of evil side. Will she kill Paige Vetus? And obviously I don't think I want her to, and I'll kind of explain what I'm thinking about doing a little bit later. Next thing, the unnamed soldiers come into Catherine's room to search, but find the gold and want to get rich instead. First introduction to the average fighting member of the unknown empire. And then have the fallen Roman Empire, as you see Sir Felix, a royal high guard in the fallen Roman Empire, but leads a small camp outside that gets attacked, and he gets killed handling a task off to his squire, which really it should be Paige, and I'll change that later. But he leads a lead where the liege lord Atticus ordered the construction of further bases in case General Pius. Paige Vetus. Paige Vetus under Sir Felix, but gets attacked early in the story and hears the last words of Sir Felix. He then goes to a mission but gets captured after falling from weakness. He finds himself in a foreign place and can't figure it out. He then meets Catherine, an unknown caretaker, as she helps his wounds heal. But it turns out after Sir William Kane orders her to open the door, she comes back seeming almost evil. And as you can see here, these events will come into hand a little bit later, as I'm going to show you another feature Campfire has that I'm going to use to continue my story. Avicus Henry dies in the First War, was a former criminal but became a soldier to try to get rid of it. Got released but came back. That's what Avicus means. I wanted to put that so I could remind myself later in case I were to forget. Anyway, Liege Atticus used him as a spy due to his talent. Lord Dominica, Lord and higher up, used in chapter 1 with his quote, For I, the knight of Rome, will and shall not be afraid. Liege Atticus, head of the legate that got attacked, members that died were Avicus Henry and Sir Felix, had ordered the construction of the forward base and had sent scouting parties to observe the surrounding areas. 3 of Rome's own legions had pushed their way into enemy territory. The camp would have been used in aid to protect the forward expansion parties and to house Roman soldiers and camp followers should Pius decide to advance. General Pius, mentioned briefly in chapter 1 with Liege Atticus ordering construction. So I kind of included all the characters you just heard me read about in my story into this program so that I can keep it organized. And then I decided to go to this timeline feature they have, Campfire has, in order to keep it organized. So I have the purple with the unknown empires and the black with the fallen Roman empires in chapter 1. And as you can see, like, if I click here before war, I talk about what happened. So, like, before the war, a slight monologue by Sir Felix reveals a bit of a struggle. Then main character Page Fetus reveals that he feels alone. And we go on from there. So I kind of included all these timelines we just heard. So, like, if you could say unknown room, it would say wakes up in the unknown empire / room as Page Fetus comes to consciousness as he notices the room to be unknown. So I kind of just talk about in a little bit briefer notices, normally a paragraph, about what just happened with each event. So what I have all here is what I've have in the story so far. I think I've kind of already said that, but you get what I'm saying. So this brings me to my point of what I'm going to do next, in particular to my story, or what my ideas are for coming up. But they have other features for this program that I might come back to in a little bit, as I haven't really explored too much of these features yet, because I'm still getting kind of new into my thoughts on what I want to do so far. But they have like a character arc, they have a relationship tab, they have a ward, as I plan on building a ward with the Unknown Empire, the Romans, and any other empire I might include in my story, because I do want it to be a multi-empire situation. So I'll check on the comments again, and then we'll get back. I haven't heard of that site before, but I'll have to check it out. I might, maybe not on this stream because I have some other sites, but maybe in my next stream, because I do plan on continuing this series at least once a week, because I do kind of want to use these live streams as a creative way to kind of keep myself going throughout the story, because it does kind of hold me accountable to actually keeping going the story, because obviously I like the story and I do want to do more to it. I kind of need something to get me to do it fully, so I do think that these streams will help. And I'll have to check out the site you mentioned, John. And you say you can use that as the prologue and have Catherine be a major villain in the rest of the story. That's an idea. Yeah, that's an idea. It would be a pretty good prologue, I have to say that. I am very proud of these implements, or the story I have so far. And I hope that I can continue it throughout, because it did take me a long time and a lot of dedication to do these 10 pages and a lot of brainstorming with other people. But then again, I do like the challenge, so I do think that I'll be able to. Okay. So I guess I'll kind of talk about that idea I was thinking about to continue the story so far, because right now it's just a little bit more than 10 pages, and obviously chapters can be different amounts. I've seen a chapter as few as like 4 pages to a chapter with like 30 something pages, so there's not really an average, but I kind of wanted it to be anywhere from like 15 to 20 pages and maybe a little bit more for the first chapter. So I was thinking about if I were to continue the story as it is and not have it as a prologue like John mentioned in the comment section, what I do think is a good idea, if I can't really figure it out exactly right. I was thinking about kind of rather changing the situation, but not really that much. So what I was thinking about was having Catherine come into the room and looking the way she looked after she got beat up. And she's a situation from within the story, or how can I say this? She's very anonymous after getting beat up, and we don't exactly know what happened to her fully. And she was seeming rather like a carrying character before she came back. And that's kind of what I wanted to happen. So if I want to keep that a little bit within the story, or do I want to go back to her caring nature and do something a little different? So I kind of had two ideas within that. My first idea was to have her still stab the character, but stab him with his chest guard or his breastplate. So in other words, she would stab him, but it wouldn't kill him. And it might injure him, which just kind of seems a little strange. But then she would, after doing that, so that it would look like... Okay, restart. I was thinking of having her stab him through the breast guard. This was my first idea. And then rearranging the death of the character. So, like, in other words, he would have died from the stab wound, but long story short, he didn't die, but rather she used another character in his place and did the burial of that other character and had him escape because she wanted him to do one of her missions, or she wanted him to escape to continue his mission, because she isn't exactly for the Empire, because we don't really know about her that much. But that would be kind of what it hints about, because I still want to keep her kind of honest to the whole situation. So that was kind of my first idea, was having her stab him with the breast guard, maybe injure him a little bit more, but organize his escape through using another soldier or somebody random as a look-alike to bury him in that way, so that it looked like she did the mission she was required to do by Sir William rather than something else. And the second idea I had was keeping it the same way and having Catherine then be the head of the story, or the main of the story. And as John kind of hinted, if I were to keep it the prologue, was maybe having her as the villain of the story, because I wasn't necessarily thinking of keeping her as the sweet character that she was before she stabbed him in this version of the story. So if I had this as the prologue and then started the actual chapter with Catherine and what she does from there, it could be a rather interesting way to keep the story going in a direction that keeps the flow. So I do kind of like the idea. So I guess you can kind of think, you could say that I was thinking similar to what John was saying, but not necessarily with the prologue. So those were kind of the two ideas I have going. And I'll look here. Jimmy says, a while back you said you struggled with writing plus your writing, but the story is not that bad. Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Obviously, well, Jimmy knows me in person, and I've told you guys this before. I have dyslexia, not that I'm really using that as an excuse. I don't really like to use it as an excuse, even if this is using it as an excuse, which I don't think it is. But long story short, it makes it hard to really like to write or to really like to read. Really, for me, it's been more really like to read. I've struggled to read books and to really learn knowledge through books, because a lot of writers have read books, who have actually published novels and stuff, have read books, and that's where they kind of get their inspiration from. And through reading, you can kind of learn how story structure works and kind of learn a lot about how to actually form what I want to make, or to form a novel. And that's why I've started to read more books, like I'm reading this Game of Thrones now, because obviously it's kind of my inspiration to start this whole thing again. But on the other hand, it's just me getting to read more as a whole, because I do need to read more to understand how structure works through that way. But like Jimmy was saying, writing isn't exactly easy for me. Yes, this sounds really good, and I'm very proud of it. That's why I want to continue, and that's why I shared the story as a whole, because I like it a lot. But this also took a long time to make. It took a month and a half of daily writing and struggling over it to create this. And then it's taken over a year to kind of think about this as a whole to start it again. So it's been really a whole year of me thinking about this almost every day, but not really doing it because of my questioning the writing and how I did it, because I did get some help within writing this story, but it wasn't exactly like it was all the person help. It was my ideas and my writing, but it's still a lot of help through the story. So I was afraid that if I were to start it again, it wouldn't be as good as a story, because this was a rather good one so far. So that's kind of that whole thing as a whole. So I was trying to think of where to go from here, as I kind of mentioned. And right now, I'm leaning more towards having her using like a body double and having Paige Vetus escape the Empire through her plan. And John was kind of interesting through this, because I was kind of thinking longer on to keep Catherine as kind of a villain, or a really like character you don't exactly trust within the story. So I'm thinking that that's what I do next, but it's also kind of interesting to think about it from here, because I will have to introduce more characters from now on. So obviously I've had to research a lot, and I've used this site here as a lot of my inspiration for names and ideas from within. And I've also used several YouTube channels to kind of learn my history for the medieval times. And I do need to learn a lot more information about the medieval times and what life was really like then, to keep going throughout my story, because especially with like travel, I want travel to be very realistic in my novel series, in my novel book, because a lot of fantasy series don't really keep travel as what it was. And obviously that may make it a little harder to kind of plot timelines and other things, but I do think it's going to make it a little different than anything else if it were to become a bigger thing than just a personal project. Not that I think that it would, but it might create something different. And I've also used this site, The History of England, just to kind of come across different terminologies that were used within the medieval times. And that's kind of where I've gotten my advocates from, and Duke and Lord. I haven't used Duke yet, but just all these terms I could use throughout the story to keep the language and tone of the story the same. And then I've also used this site for kind of like medieval weapons, and that's where I got like the sword from, as I was trying to think of a type of sword to use. And then obviously, as I've already said, I'm using my time period as just after the fall of the Roman Empire. And then John asked, what history channels have you watched? I mean, let's put it this way. I have watched, well, if you're talking about YouTube, well, anyway, I'll start with this. I used to watch a lot of History Channel, period, like on TV. And it used to be really good, as I remember they did a series about the Roman Empire that I really liked. And I think that it was even showed in my high school I went to in their history class as a whole. Because, as I've said at the beginning of the stream, this was a very influential time period that I really liked to learn when I was in high school. And it was like probably 3 years ago that we learned about the Roman Empire and kind of the Renaissance time. And obviously this is a little different than the medieval times, but you kind of understand those concepts. But as far as YouTube goes, I've listened to a lot of Shadversity, yeah. I always have to listen to how he says it. Anyway, I listened to a lot of him, and I've also just kind of searched topics, and excuse me. I don't like to just believe what one person says, as I kind of want to research what a YouTuber says to what actually might have happened, because obviously YouTubers aren't really held to the same credibility as other sites like History Channel, even though you can kind of argue that History Channel isn't exactly history either. But anyway, I like to have several different people saying the same thing in order to continue. But a lot of times I've just searched topics like medieval castles and what were in them, and like a realistic medieval castle, what was it? Not any of the fantasy castles that have all these crazy rooms, but what would an actual castle be like? Or what was medieval armory like? And that's where I think I probably watched it to learn if it did rust. I don't exactly remember anymore if I was just a general thought I had because of what metals are. But like I've generally searched topics to search for YouTube, but I wouldn't say I necessarily follow someone in particular that just does those concepts, but more just a topic that I find interesting and then see what information is out there. And then John says, Shadiversity is excellent resource. I was going to recommend him if you hadn't watched him yet. Yeah, I really like him. I'm on his Discord as well. And you probably noticed if you watch his content recently, John, but he published a fantasy novel on Amazon, and I think you can buy it other places than just Amazon, but I know you can find it on Amazon. And I'm considering buying it as well and reading it with this Game of Thrones as I just picked up. But I kind of want to take it one book at a time. But I do want to read his book because I remember when he first published it, I listened to his video about it, and he was very emotional about the whole experience. And he has dyslexia as well, so he's kind of been a inspiration to look back into this story and to kind of make it into a novel, as he was able to as well. And it took him years to do that. So obviously I don't plan on it being a very fast process, but he has been an inspiration to kind of really take this project more seriously as a whole. So yeah, I've listened. The last video I listened to his was on the castles. That's why it was a recent example, and he had a whole video about like what medieval castles really were like. And he kind of talked about how a lot of people think that they all have throne rooms and things like that, when all castles didn't necessarily have throne rooms. But do you recommend anybody else with YouTube as far as medieval content or history content within that time period go? And then John says, I have Chad's book. It's pretty good. Yeah, I've heard, and on Amazon it has very good ratings. And obviously that could be just his fans on Discord or YouTube as a whole supporting him. But yeah, I've heard very good things about the book from within his Discord server to Amazon comments to even some YouTube comments throughout his videos. So I do really want to read his book, and as I've said, he's already kind of an inspiration from just his YouTube content to what he did to get his book fully done. Let's see here. I think I'll go back to the campfire program I got here. And also, just real quick side note, I'm pretty sure he was the one what mentioned campfire on one of his videos, and I've checked it out and kind of talked to some of their people who work for Campfire on their Discord and other things, and Reddit I believe it was, and decided to purchase it for myself because it is somewhat expensive for just trying to make this idea fully done. But I do think it's very important to do in order to kind of keep myself organized, because I do need that organization if I were to make this become an actual book. So I was going to check out this relationship web, as I've kind of talked about it, or not really talked about it. I kind of looked about it earlier within exploring this Campfire program, and I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a pro with Campfire as a whole process, but what can I say? I want to explore all its futures more to kind of create this situation as a whole. And so you have your relationship web, but I meant to click this one here, the character arc And obviously, I'm not even fully finished with a chapter, but I was thinking of creating these arcs for each one so far and kind of my ideas for it so far as a whole. And so, in general, you have your good characters and you have your bad characters. You have your characters you root for and you have your characters you don't root for. But I also want characters you're unsure about, because I believe that is very good writing if you have characters you're not sure really who to side with. So again, going back to Game of Thrones, because I watched the television show and read excerpts from the book and such, Littlefinger was the great example of that character you don't know necessarily to trust. Even though more people didn't trust Littlefinger, they still liked the character because of the way he was written. He was very conniving, but he was smart about it, or at least it seemed like he was smart about it. Even though, I won't say that. If you yeah. So I want characters like that. So as a whole, before I've kind of thought about it in this stream and other ideas, I was thinking of having Catherine as a kind of in-between character who you don't exactly know to trust or not. But again, going through these each characters and each idea, I was thinking which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones are in between. But as I was thinking about that, obviously I have the Empire, what it's not named. So I was trying to think, what do I want this Empire to be based on or based off of? And I've already mentioned ships and boats. So what I was thinking was having this empire near water, obviously, and to have a very strong navy as a whole. So because I want a very good ground empire, which was going to be my Roman Empire, and I want to have a very good navy proponent as well. So obviously that would be England if you go back into history. So I was thinking of either having England or based off Greek. And obviously I might be skipping across times and but keeping it still within the period. So long story short, although I want to keep the medieval story realistic, I still want to implement different empires for different times within the story. So although the Greek and like the Spartans were a different time than the Roman Empire, I want to bring the Spartans into the medieval empire. So that might mean I have to change some things. It's still something I want to explore within writing this story. And obviously that's something I could change later if I figure out that I don't really like it or it doesn't really fit to the story as well. But I do think it would be a cool idea if I include parts what weren't necessarily in the medieval empire, but still changing them to fit what that would have been like, or what I think those warriors would have been like within the medieval empire. But I'll check on the comments real quick. Yeah, this is John's comment here, which I read. Alrighty, so I'll go back to campfire for a little bit and just kind of talk about with each character. So obviously from what you know of Sir William Kane, he's in charge of the Queen's Guard. And so that means that there's obviously a queen within the empire. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the queen has to be in charge, as, yeah, they king and queen. But I was thinking of having this unknown empire have a queen in charge. And that can obviously change as I haven't introduced the queen yet, or the dynamic might change. But long story short, I was going to have Sir William Kane as kind of the character who is good for the empire as a whole, but if you don't like that empire, then you wouldn't like that character. So in other words, you have different viewpoints. So writing each empire as a different viewpoint, whatever viewpoint you like the best, you're going to like that character and what he stands for. But if you don't like that viewpoint and what that character is through that viewpoint, then you're not going to like who that character is, even though they stick to that viewpoint. And I think that makes sense. And a lot of novels are kind of based off that way, because you'll have your one empire what is very greedy and is all about money. But then you'll have your other empire what is more open to, like, everybody kind of has the same sort of status or income level as a whole. So you'll have your different ideas throughout each empire. And although I haven't really necessarily made what each empire stands for yet, because you don't even really know much about the empires in what I've written so far, you only really know about 2 or 3 characters, even though several characters are mentioned. Anyway, you have Sir Jester, who is above Sir William and is in charge of defense. And obviously, since they're a more naval component, he was going to be in charge of the Navy, and that's what I was thinking of. Again, I mentioned Catherine. I want to kind of have her as an in-between character, but more kind of a villain, like a Littlefinger type of character. That's kind of what I wanted to go off of her. The soldiers are just soldiers. And then, as far as the Roman Empire and the fallen Roman Empire, I generally wanted the rooting interest of the whole to be with the fallen Roman Empire. And again, so I'm in very early stages, you probably could tell, of what I plan to do with it as a whole and what I plan to implement for like themes of what each empire stands for. But in general, as of now, I had Paige Fetus as the main character. So following through his and what he stands for through the Roman Empire would be that rooting interest. But at the same time, I don't want each character to be just good or just bad, because that's kind of boring. That's like 3rd grade level writing if you have just good and just bad. I want every character to kind of have a gray implement. Every good story, even with their main characters, has bad flaws for each person or for each character and what that person stands for as a whole. And I could go through several examples of that through many of real popular stories as a whole. And I think we all know that. The basic art of storytelling, you can't just have a character what's right away perfect at everything. That's rather boring, and nobody's going to want to read about that. So obviously I want a gray area for everyone in between. But in general, since you follow that one character, he's probably going to be the rooting interest of the story. Therefore, the Roman Empire would be the rooting interest of the story. But I don't exactly want it to be as simple as that. Check on the comments again real quick. Here we go. Names are tough, but a good way of naming empires is to take what their name is, naval strength in this case, and translate it to another language, or mixing 2 words into one. Yeah, I wouldn't say that I necessarily have what can I say? Let's see. That's a good idea. I would say that I've thought about other situations as a whole, because obviously I don't want each empire to kind of be boring, because a good book, a good novel really makes you think about certain situations. Like, you want your character names to mean something normally. Like, if your main character is somebody what's very important, you could have a name what's like in Greek mythology what means something. Like love, or means something like strength, like or you know what I'm getting at. And I wanted my empires not just to be like France, not just England, Rome, Russia, or whatever. You don't just want these plain names for each empire. At least that's not what I want for my book, for each empire to be named. And I've done limited amount of research, but I do want to do more research about it as a whole, and to have empires what means something. And as of now, I was thinking a lot about Greek words and Greek mythology to name certain empires. And obviously, since I've kind of talked about it already, I have the fallen Roman Empire, and obviously I can change that name as well, as I'm not fully convinced on that as a whole. But then again, I still want each empire to represent a major country or major empire in the past. And as I've talked about a little earlier, I do want to bring other empires into the time period, such as Sparta or Athens and other big empires that have existed, into other empires that didn't exist at the same time. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. So I did want the empire to mean something. So like, let's go to the empire I haven't named yet. If I want it to mean like strong seas or something like what has a little bit of a meaning to it. But I wouldn't say I'm necessarily very good at creating names or Greek mythology, so I do need to do a lot of research within that as a whole to name the empire something where the person, if they're interested, the reader, if they're interested, would look it up on Google or whatever and go, oh, I get it, it's because of this. I want that click to be there. But I don't want it to be so bizarre that someone, when they read the Empire's name, just kind of laughs and goes, yeah, this is ridiculous. He's just naming names out of his ass or whatever it would be. So it's that happy medium as a whole that I want to exist. So I've kind of been thinking about a timeline and what I want to do next in order to advance the story and keep it going. So that like next week, if I decide to do the stream again, which I'm thinking of doing, I could update you on what I've done from my checklist and keep going from there and kind of brainstorm aloud. So my first theory was figure out how to continue the story. So like John mentioned, I could keep it as a prologue and then kind of start with well, he didn't mention this, but I would kind of then start with Catherine as being the first event what happened in the story and what she does next after the situation. Or I could do what I was thinking before this stream, and that is continue the story, but have Catherine stab him in the breast guard, and then have a body double or whatever come in, and so that the barrier would happen, and she fulfilled her mission while letting him escape. So if I decide to do that, that's what I do. But figure out what I want to do with that as a whole. Then I wanted to figure out the campfire program and other features. So I want to create a character arc for each character, even though it's very early on, because I still want to make sure I keep up with everything fully so that everything makes sense, because that's the way I'm going to have to do it if I were to keep going throughout this story. So I want to really invest myself into Campfire and use all its features and just get my mind going throughout. I also wanted to search for names with meanings, such as character names and empire names as a whole, because I want, as I've said a little bit earlier, I want people's brains to kind of think about what does that word originally mean, or search it on Google for an empire or a character name, and that character name then gives you a hint of what they are as a person or what they might be throughout the story. So those were kind of the three things I was brainstorming at first for to continue the story, as I'm not going to do any writing on this stream, because I more just kind of want to introduce my book and introduce my idea and kind of see what your thoughts were of the whole situation. While my second stream, what I'm planning to do of this book next week, probably next Monday, I was thinking of keeping it every Monday, I would update you on my ideas so far, and hopefully by next Monday I would have something written, or maybe a couple different ideas written to continue the story, because obviously I want you to be there with me throughout this experience, because I'm using a person's example through Discord to keep myself accountable through these live streams, and I also like sharing my ideas and to create interest within my idea, because I do like that as a whole, I guess you would say. But yeah, I'll think about this a little bit more and kind of let y'all comment anymore if you have any other comments or ideas. But I was kind of thinking of those three things so far. If you have any idea for what I should include in my checklist to kind of think about this story a little bit more and to kind of continue it throughout the upcoming days. And as John said, I already read the comment, but it's interesting to think about combining two different names into one as a whole for the empire to represent something. But I also think about translating. I have thought of that option before, as I was thinking of mainly Greek, just because that was the first thing what came to mind. And I think I missed this comment, but John said, if you want more Roman stuff, Metatron is a really good one. Is that a YouTube channel or a book? Or a website? I'm not particularly sure on that one. I probably butchered the name. That was another funny thing, and I think everyone might experience this, but definitely with me. Even through reading my own words and my own ideas, I'll mispronounce things and other things like that. So it's something I'm also working on. And I do think that if I read more, it'll come a little bit naturally as well, because this is going to be a very long project, and I realize that. And but I hope that you'll kind of go through this experience with me. And I do think that it's a good idea to have. I really like my idea, and we'll see what comes of it throughout the next weeks or so. It's a YouTube channel. Okay, that's what I thought. I'll have to save that. I'll write that down. Oh, also I got this new shirt I got for my birthday. As a whole. Why do I keep saying as a whole? I think I'm just have that stuck. Anyway. So, YouTube channel. I'll make sure to write that before I forget. I'm also going to, before this next stream, every time I move, this table moves. So I'm going to figure out a way to kind of secure the table a little bit more so we don't have it as bouncy as it was. And the mic's a little bit bouncy too. So I'll kind of figure out an idea for that, just because it's a little bit annoying to watch it bounce, I imagine. But it's all a learning process. This is only second live stream I've done. So I do think it's a rather good experience so far, and I hope you think the same. So yeah, I think I'm going to end the stream here, unless if you guys have any more comments or ideas. And then again, I also have my Discord channel, and I was going to say YouTube, obviously. I then have my Discord channel and Twitter, and I have some other social media, but those are kind of the main two ones I'm always on, is Discord and Twitter. So you can kind of contact me with your ideas or join my Discord channel with your ideas. I have a question of the day with my Discord as well, and I've started to recently get back to my question of the day. I stopped it for a while just because I couldn't really think of anything, and I kind of was in a rut with the whole YouTube making and Discord as a whole, because my Discord was originally a school project, and that's why I had a question of the day. But now I have a little more freedom with it. So my question of the day today was, have you picked up any hobby due to this COVID-19 going around? Was it a good thing? Did you like what you picked up, or was it something you didn't really enjoy and probably want to do again type of situation? And I also have other YouTube channels, or not YouTube channels, other YouTubers that post through my Discord channel as well, because I'm a part of the Freedom Scoop network. And so you can go on the freedomscoop.com to explore that whole situation. And that's where John is from with Generational Gap. And you have then Stephen Igaramus and R-Rated Conservative. They're all on Freedom Scoop. And although it's mainly political as a whole, it doesn't necessarily have to be. And it wasn't always political either. As Ed does a gaming channel, or not a gaming channel, but a gaming series on his YouTube as well. So it's not all political, but it has. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. And Freedom Scoop through Generational Gap is doing a April 10th live stream over. Well, not over, but. April 10th live stream with the helping a charity live stream with helping COVID-19 first responders and everything with that. So if you have time on April 10th, they would appreciate, and I would appreciate if you were to join that live stream, as I'll also be there for part of it. So yeah, that's as a whole, and I'll read John's comment here as I see his comment again. If you need any help with history questions or writing in general, reach out to me. I will help you out. Yeah, for sure, I'll reach out to you. I know you're very big on history, so I was kind of planning to already, but now that you did the invite yourself, I'll definitely use you for some history questions. So as I was saying, as a whole. And also, you could check out my YouTube videos, as I'm going to publish some more stuff a little more frequently, political and non-political, because as COVID-19 keeps going, not everybody wants to be surrounded with the same news with COVID-19, because it can be rather depressing. So I hope you'll check me out on my other YouTube videos, or check out Freedom Scoop through their videos, and see you on the next live stream. And thank you, Jimmy and John, for being on the live stream, and any others who are watching this video now or later. I appreciate you for being there, and I hope you enjoyed the content and enjoyed my story, and hope to see you next time through this live stream series or any other videos. Peace.